So we will call the meeting to order and note that here in the room we have Guy Billion, Graham Ball, Drew Herzig, Jonathan Sisla, Greg Kluge, Harriet Applegate. On Zoom we have Stephanie Morris and Roland Anglin, and we have our guest today, Janine Boyd. And we have Lee Kremrine in the law department here also. So, Councilor Boyd, thanks very much for taking the time to come and visit with us. We've been interested in having some input from members of City Council to get their perspectives on what, in their view, might need to be updated in the charter. So we appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us today. And I think we'll begin by just going around the room and have everybody introduce themselves in case there's anybody here who don't know. So Graham, do you want to begin?
Sure. I'm Graham Ball. I live on Bradford.
I'm Drew Herzig. I also live on Bradford. We're the Bradford buddies over here.
I'm Harriet Applegate.
Roland.
Roland Anglin, Cleveland Heights, Scarborough.
I'm Stephanie Morris. I live on Scarborough. This is Lily.
I'm Jonathan Sisla. I live in Scarborough as well.
I didn't know.
Oh,
He's on out of Undelwood.
Greg Kluge, I live on Stillman.
And Linda Strafsky, I live on Delamere. So what we've done with the other city council members who have visited with us is started with
Assistant Law Director Lee Crow.
Oh, that's what I thought.
we started with asking them what are the top 2 or 3 issues raised in our survey that they consider to be most important, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I know you haven't filled out the survey, but why don't we start with that and then we can backfill with the survey after that.
So could you repeat the question?
From the questions we asked in the survey, what are the 2 or 3 that are most important to you?
So to be fully candid, I'm much more of a legislator than I am a form of government advocate. I find that I operate well legislatively, which is my role, in pretty much any condition. I served in the House, as you are well aware, representing our community for 7.5 years in the super minority, and was still able to pass bipartisan legislation fully funded without putting burdens on local government. So I don't have any issues with either the previous form of government or the current form of government, honestly.
Well, we're not looking at form of government. It's really more about are there things in the charter that need to be changed.
Which forms are, which is the sort of the formula that sets our government in place, right? So I really, in general, don't have any particular issue with the current charter or the previous charter. The citizens did. So I just supported the citizens.
We're curious about, because the most recent charter amendment being done by initiative was extremely limited in its ability to restructure the charter. And there are parts now where, we're going through and saying, well, that fits in with the new mayoral system of administration, but this doesn't, and this is ambiguous. And so that's the largest part of our struggle currently, is figuring out which needs more definition and which should be left alone. If you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, we were only 2 years in. It's hard to say. Yes. I feel like we haven't really, it's not had a fair test, in my opinion. I think you really, and there's been so many nuances to it, right? We're outside of the pandemic. We dealt with a revenue source that we've never had before, which was ARPA. You've got a lot of folks on council who've never legislated before, and you've got a mayor who's never been a mayor before. So and then you've got members of the administration who were here previously under a different form of government, different charter. So I really don't think there's been enough time to assess fully what works and what might not work moving forward. That's my opinion. Sorry, my back is to you.
Can you hear okay, Roland and Stephanie? All right. Okay.
One of the specific questions in the survey was what changes, if any, should be considered regarding the balance of powers between the mayor and city council. So for example, there has been debate about the extent to which members of city council can request information from the administrative folks in the city hall or communicate with them. So do you think that the existing charter text that seems to refer to requests only for purposes of inquiry is appropriate, or should the charter have a different way of addressing how city council members get information from city departments, particularly what they need for legislating?
So I think you have to maintain some level of broadness. You have a new council leadership team, so they might not need changes to
Oh, they seem to
assess.
think they need changes.
Well, but they are a week on the job, you know, and they've been having meetings with administration, at least according to them.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I think prescribing anything to any particular administration or particular council leadership or is not in the best interest of the city, because all those parties can change very quickly. So I think as broad as you can be, giving some room for, you know, collaboration and innovative ways of doing things. I think you give the city, you know, the benefit of potential partnerships and new ways of communication and new systems to be created by new leadership. So I would stay broad.
Our facilitator and other people have reminded us that the charter needs to be long-term structures.
Yes.
Ordinances can be changed depending on the
Right.
makeup and the dynamic, but a charter shouldn't be too,
Rigid.
we need to take the long, and I'm being a rigid type of personality, I'm struggling with
Yeah,
that, but
sure.
nonetheless, you know.
But
Yes,
but you can't be specific to the people that are in these roles now, is the point.
Yes,
Because they're not gonna be in these roles for long, necessarily.
Yes.
I mean, you don't know who's gonna run for what next. I mean, this is politics.
Well, true, but
So-
I think the sense we're getting from members of city council is that recognizing that their primary role is to legislate, they feel that they're having a hard time doing that because they can't have communication with directors and other people in the administrative staff.
I don't find administrators not to be responsive to emails. So
Well,
if they're not
do you
responding
think
to
that other
emails-
people have that same experience?
I mean, I don't know what they're emailing. You know, I know what I'm emailing, I know what questions I'm asking. I may not, the answer I get isn't always a green light to move forward with a particular set of legislative concepts, but it's either, it's an answer and I move on based on that, you know. I
You get
move
an
on to
answer
my-
promptly?
Oh, it depends on the department. I mean, public safety and health, which I chair, is a very busy very busy area of the city, and so I might have to wait for those responses. But I understand why.
Craig Cobb had a similar impression. He was also saying, this is a brand new, we're still in the learning curve part of this new structure. We've got new counselors with no previous experience. It's premature to start messing with it too much because we're still all learning how to function with this kind of thing. So it hasn't been universally, it's all bad. It's been, you know, pretty much split. We feel though that this commission was appointed in part as like a distress call. And we want to take that very seriously without overreacting to it.
Sure, I think that's the right position to take. I don't think overreaction serves anyone. Well, it serves some.
One specific we heard, particularly for appointees to fill vacancies is you would like to not have to run again immediately after being appointed to fill a seat kind of
Oh,
thing.
okay.
So that's something that is in the charter that we could adjust so that
Referring to an elected seat or to or commissions?
no, an elected
An
seat, sorry,
elected
yeah.
seat, oh, to
City,
one.
yeah, city council.
I don't know, I mean, I think that's pretty universal though. I don't know what would set us apart. I mean, if you fill a seat in the State House and the term is almost up, you have to run.
Yeah,
You fill
yeah.
a seat in most city councils, I imagine, you have to run, at least what I've seen.
I think the question is whether you run in the next municipal election or do you run in the next general election?
I think you run whenever the seat is up,
Right.
period.
No, we've talked about that there's a tension between having the voters get the chance to weigh in as soon as possible,
Mhm,
which means the next election that comes up
mhm,
is when you run for the unexpired term.
mhm.
And then the next time a municipal election comes around, you run for a full term, if you so desire.
I mean, I think you just follow the standard, in my opinion.
Yeah, we were wondering for people who might be new to it, is it asking them too much to be considered like a placeholder, but still having to educate themselves to do a good job for a couple months, maybe kind of thing. So, but I guess nobody forces them to apply for the position. so
Exactly,
you
and
take
this
on.
is not, I mean, it's not, you know, you're not interim executive director. This is an elected public office. So I don't think I just think you follow the standard,
So, what would the standard be?
what I just said,
No,
which is
the
whatever the
state-
next, when the term is up,
Oh, I
is when
see.
you run.
Is that the standard?
As far as I've
Okay,
seen, yeah. I've not seen,
Well, right now, the charter says you run in the next election, whether it's general or municipal, whatever election comes up next, you run. So if you're running if the general election comes up first, you run in the general for the unexpired term, and then when the municipal election rolls around, you run again.
so I don't think I realized that. I've always run when the term is up.
That would make sense to serve the term and then run again or
Correct.
vacate the case. So we should look into that because that would make a whole lot of sense.
Look into what?
Saying, stipulate that somebody who's appointed will hold that seat until that seat comes up for a regular election.
Well,
rather
that's
than
what a
to-
couple of people have proposed.
Yeah, that's what I'm proposing here as well, is just to take that in because that's the common sense assumption as opposed to you just got appointed that seat.
Whatever the remaining part of the term is, that's what you serve, and then you have to run.
That gives people who might apply for it a much better sense of how long they might be in that chair rather than, whoops, I didn't look at the
Well, and
calendar, there's an election
yes.
around.
And it could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 months, it could
Yes.
be, 2 years, it just depends.
It's less democracy, however.
What?
It's less democracy. You've got an appointed person serving potentially longer.
But if someone vacates a seat, I mean, that's,
Yeah. I mean, that's the other side of that.
Yeah.
Are there any other aspects of the provisions in the charter about filling vacancies that you would like to see changed?
I mean, I think the way we're set up, council selects, and if there's a tie, there has to be a tiebreaker, that's how it is, I think, in most forms of government. Up to the federal level, so I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah, we were wondering who, if there is a deadlock in the council, who's gonna take the onus of breaking that?
Yeah.
Should it be the council president or the mayor? Currently it's set up to be the mayor, that gets some, kind of thing. But it seems to me to take that out of the council puts less pressure on the council president to break the deadlock.
he's
in
already
some
had a vote,
instances.
right, or she,
Yes.
they've already had a
Exactly,
vote.
yes.
So to have them vote twice seems anti-democratic, to use her terms.
A couple,
I don't know who else it would be, it would need to be someone elected.
Mhm.
can't be the law director or the member of administration, that wouldn't make sense.
Do you think that the city charter should be changed to require city council approval to hire directors other than law and finance?
Ask that again?
Should the charter be changed to require city council approval for hiring directors beyond the director of law and finance?
I don't think so. I mean, we're legislators, I don't. No, I don't think so. When I look at the executive level of government, or the executive branch at the state level, we don't get to confirm the governor's picks. You know, that's not how that goes. Congress, you know, with some exception, that's usually Supreme Court, right, confirmations. So no, I don't see.
Any of the commission members have any other questions about the balance of powers issues?
Well, I don't know if it's strictly the balance of powers, but you served under the city manager form at that county
Yes.
council, and you served under the new form of government. Do you see any differences which you think could be addressed, or that
By the
pose any
charter?
problems that could be addressed by the work we're doing?
I mean, candidly, no, I think most of it is personalities, so I don't think you can put a lot of stuff in writing and it won't change.
You're not the first person to say that.
Yeah, I think we're struggling with that because we sense that there's, on the one hand, there are a lot of people who think that something should change to reinforce the notion that the voters would like people to get along better and to be more collaborative and cooperative.
That's up to them.
Well, I don't know that it necessarily can be left up to them, because I think there's a certain amount of cooperation and collaboration that's necessary to get things done. If you're trying to do legislation and you need to talk to directors about your legislation, you need to have a mechanism for doing that.
But I do, and they do, but it's about what you ask. And I've said this before, and I've said it to them, to my colleagues. Depending on what you're asking, you know, I mean, if you're asking a question that's related, if you submit a proposal and you ask for someone to review it and to give you feedback, I think you get a response relatively quickly. But if you're
You may
just
have a different
asking,
experience than other people.
I've been asked, you might be surprised. I've seen some of the kinds of questions that are asked, and they don't always. Sometimes there's so many that I can't imagine having the time. I work full time. I can't imagine having the time to answer all those questions in one email. You know, so I think presenting some sort of proposal or bulleted concept around that's legislative and you want some feedback from a particular department, I think you'll get more bang for your buck. If you just ask 15 questions in one email, even 11 questions in one email, you might have to wait because there's no context. And so it's a lot more time consuming. And if you're running a department, I mean, look at what we're about to get 5 to 9 inches of snow overnight. I wouldn't ask Director Cleansdale and her people anything for the next 6 days, you know, or expect an answer for the next 2 weeks. So, you know, we just had another traumatic or tragic event of gun violence. I mean, there's so much going on that if you don't bring something that has some context so that people can sort of, oh, I see, all right, okay, we already actually kind of have something like this. Let me send it to them. I mean, if you don't have something like that, it's very difficult. You know, it's very difficult. That's my.
Along those lines, we were considering putting in something about requiring training for newly elected so that they understand more of the legislative process and the separation of powers and the ethics of office, which are, as you know from your experience, is not the same as just your day-to-day ethics. There's open meeting law, there's all sorts of conflict of interest things that currently there is no, training stipulated in the charter kind of thing. And we were thinking particularly for newly elected people who've never served in government
Sure.
before, it could be very valuable
Yes.
to just, there's still a learning curve, but just to give them an idea about, it's not like your exterior life, it's quite different.
I think that an orientation would be very helpful. In State House, we had orientation, and even though it didn't necessarily teach us the legislative process, and some of that is on the ground learning. And by the way, Linda, to your point, on the ground learning, some folks have been on council for a number of years. So learning how to navigate a new charter or a new form of government, having been on council and creating legislation in the past, if you know how to create legislation, navigating a new charter or a new set of rules shouldn't be that difficult. But I think that an orientation would be really helpful. I think that that's definitely something that the Charter Review Commission could could advocate for. Our orientation in the legislature was a couple days, and it was very helpful.
Yeah, when we talked to Craig, he said he was aware that he had to do some online training, but he would just happen to be aware of it. There was nothing after his election that said, by the way, these are required by the state or anything. So my personal feeling when it happened to me, it's like it was very helpful to say, here are the different things you must do, and here's some things that might be available to you that could help you understand your role a lot.
I agree.
There are some other issues that we have been talking about that some people in the community seem to think we should look at. This is just kind of anecdotal information we've gotten from the community, but one of those is ranked choice voting. Do you have any view on ranked choice
I
voting?
do not. I do not have a view. I'm interested in people being registered to vote. That's it.
Okay, how about the method that we use for electing city council? How do you feel about switching to a hybrid method where some are at large and some are by wards? Or switching to a method of all election by ward?
So I think that, if I had a position regarding a mayoral form of government versus a city manager form of government, that would have gotten in the way of me being a representative of the residents who put me in place. I feel the same way about that. I think there are pros and cons to both. You could have a ward situation and folks are fighting over pots of money for their communities. We're potentially less unified, and we think that we're divided now. Your potential for, deeper ugliness is real. So there's that. At large, people still have to make the choice to collaborate. There's less opportunity for that potentially with wards. I don't know. It's really up to residents. It's just like any situation. To get something new, you have to give something up.
So you think that at large leads to more collaboration?
It generally can. You're not fighting over who gets what for their ward. That's the point, right? What we get for the city, we get for the city.
Again, that depends sometimes on the personalities involved as well.
Do you think it would be appropriate to have a comprehensive non-discrimination policy statement in the charter?
Sure.
And how about a provision to protect the rights of citizens, rights of residents without citizenship, such as sanctuary city status?
Absolutely.
Anybody have any other questions you want to ask on those things?
One evening, we had to use the council chambers because this room was unavailable, and we found the inability to make eye contact with the other counselors really problematic because it's like we're kind of,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So it's nothing in our control. We just wanted to say we experienced that, and boy, it was a weird feeling.
It
Kind of
is.
like not being able to see somebody that you're trying to address, but then you're almost talking at them rather than
Yes.
to them.
Well, really, it's not proper etiquette to address each other when we're in a council meeting. We shouldn't even be calling each other's names.
Yeah. And I guess that would be part of training too, is like
Yep.
parliamentary procedure, yes.
The final question that was in the survey is related to the 2019 Charter Review Commission. And it's whether there were particular changes recommended in their report, aside from the city manager issue, which you would recommend that we consider. So those included gender neutral language and modernizing the language. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's appropriate to make it gender neutral.
Another one was changes to the initiative recall and referendum provisions.
So what change, I don't know what changes, what kinds of changes.
Those were based on the proportion of people who voted in the last election.
Okay.
When you're saying we need a threshold of
Oh, I
X many
see.
signatures, saying based on the people who actually voted,
Who voted.
rather than the registered voters at
Oh,
large,
yeah.
just the people who actually voted
Okay.
last time around.
That seems reasonable.
And depending on whether it's initiative or referendum, the percentages changed, but the suggested modification was to have that percentage of the last tabulated vote count rather
Sure.
than just an amorphous
Right,
registered people out there.
which may not even be completely accurate.
Yes.
That seems reasonable.
The third one was charter review timing. The charter currently calls for a review every 20 years.
Oh, that's right, I remember that. That seems like a long time.
And if I remember correctly, part of the reason we exist is they accelerated it because they were in a new form of government.
Correct.
And then there also were changes made in that draft to provisions in the charter that relate to finances and budgeting.
I believe some of those were superseded by the current charter, which puts the mayor in charge of some of that. This was, the 2019 proposed was a city manager form of government, so we can't use all of their restructuring because
Right.
it wouldn't fit into the current charter.
Yeah, but some of it had to do with changing language about what is supposed to be included in a budget presentation. So for instance, it would include things like projections of capital spending over a few years and some things like that that I think may have been done this most recent year.
Yes,
Um,
it was very thorough.
Yeah, we heard good reports from your
Yes.
recent budgeting
Very thorough.
process, that it seemed much more collaborative.
And very thorough, very detailed.
Was there anything else from the 2019 final report that you think we ought to think about?
I don't have any,
Okay, does anybody have any other questions for Councillor Boyd?
Nothing at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
no problem. Gotta stay warm.
Well, I hope you can stay off the road tomorrow.
I get to, it'll probably be a snow day for my child, so we'll be outside making snow. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Take a seat at the table. So we appreciate you filling out the survey and taking the time to meet with us. We thought it might be helpful if we started out by asking you, of the things that we covered in the survey, what were the two or three things that you feel
Introductions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Introductions.
For the record, Janine Wood has left us and Melody Hart has joined us.
Yes.
I know Greg. Harriet. I know Greg. I know Linda.
Yeah, Roland,
Ah,
you're on mute.
What he said was Roland Anglin, Scarborough Road.
Sorry about that. Roland Anglin, resident of Cleveland Heights, live on Scarborough.
nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Morris. I also live on Scarborough.
Yeah, it was kind of amazing how many people apply from Scarborough and Bradford,
Yes.
two very popular streets.
Yeah.
And I'm Jonathan Cecil, and I live on Scarborough. No, it was funny because we've never met, so it was funny to see how the geography worked out.
So thanks for reminding me that, Greg.
Delaware.
Yes, I remember you.
Melody, did you know Lee Crumrine?
I'm Assistant Law Director Lee Crimrine.
Oh, hi, howdy. Yes, I saw you in your office.
Yeah.
It's interesting how some city councilors had never met Lee before, even though he worked for the city.
Oh, yeah, I'd met him. I actually was walked by his office when I was looking for.
He's been very, very helpful for our efforts here.
That's good.
And you're
My husband,
another,
yes.
yes, yeah.
Yes.
So, as I was saying, if you want to, tell us what 2 or 3 things that were called out in the survey that you think are most important, just so we'll start with that and then we'll
Okay,
go from
so
there.
one thing is a change that we made to the charter that has proven, I think, to be just horrible. And that's the appointment process for council, when you have a council member. Because now you get appointed and instead of filling out the term, you have to go to the next election, not the next municipal election, the next election. And if it's like too quick, I mean, you're already, it costs like $25,000 to run. So you're asking someone to run within a short period of time, and then they have to run again. And then they might have to run again when they go for the next term. So you're really tapping them out. I think the 45 days was fine, although I thought 60 would be better, but I think it would be better to either have it go to the next municipal election that's over a certain period of time away, or just say have them finish out the term. So that's one thing I think, because that's been problematic. Let's see.
So a quick question with that, actually, was that changed by council after the mayoral form, or was it changed with the referendum?
No, it's not changed with the referendum.
Okay,
It was changed after that.
okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Let's see. I think reducing petition signatures would be good. Having people, for county council, you need 50. To be state rep, you need like 50 or 100. And you need like 350 for council. And that makes it harder for people, particularly when you're at large. You have to go out and cover a lot of territory. So I think making it fewer will encourage more people to run. So that's something I think would be important. I think the budget process is important and needs to be in the hands of the council in terms of what they require and what they want. And that has worked. I've been able to collaborate really well with the mayor, and he agreed on the way we did it this year. But that's not to say that every mayor would.
Right, so the one question we had was that there were changes proposed by the 2019 Charter Review Commission. The language that's currently in the charter did not follow those changes. There were some changes made with the elected mayor changes, but not all of the changes that were proposed in 2019. So what we're really looking for input on is to what extent you think what's in the charter right now works, or were there things, for instance, that may have been done this year that weren't necessarily specified in the charter, but you think should be preserved for future years?
Okay, the way it worked when we had the city manager, so it would be the same form that is in the charter now, was that basically they presented to us, usually in about a 1 hour meeting, which was the election of the city manager, the budget, and then we vote on it. And you didn't have you could ask questions, but there wasn't a lot of detail that you had. So it made it, I think, harder to get the detail you needed. And we tried, a year ago, we started to make the change to have more detail, and we went further with it this year. I think it's important that the council has the authority to say, here's what we want. And if I want 5 days of budget hearings, I get 5 days of budget hearings. And if I wanna have 10 Zoom meetings, I get 10 Zoom meetings, you know, just so that we can get the information that's in sufficient detail.
So does that include having department directors present to help with questions and?
Yes, they were there this year, yes. They have to present, you know, we have to be able to ask them questions. And it worked to their great benefit this year because we changed a lot of things and gave them a lot more than they were asking for, particularly the police. So I think that, and parks as well. So I think having them there, and one of the questions we asked them is, like, what would you like to have to make your job go better and for the department go better? And we got information from them. We're able to make those changes. So in the past, no changes were generally made. Last year, we made one change, which was for the Denison Park splash pad. And this year, we made a lot of changes.
No, I can see how that would be very helpful and productive.
Yeah.
But right now, under the charter, city council doesn't have the authority to require directors to attend even budget meetings.
Yes, they do need to, I mean, I do feel that you can't do the budget without having access to the departments. Otherwise, someone else is translating what a department said and it doesn't
Right.
give you the detail. And I'm sorry, I'm just being a finance nerd, but I think having that is important.
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, it's not like we need money or anything. No, it's good to hear because it's really important. It's you don't worry about it till you don't have it.
Right.
So if you put everything in place, then it's easier to deal with.
Well, and I could see why, I could understand very well your point that it was really helpful not only to city council, but helpful to the departments because they were able to explain what they needed and you in some cases gave them more than what they had initially
Yes.
been allocated. It just calls to my mind that, you know, we've heard from some people that they have great difficulty getting any communication with directors. They don't have the opportunity to talk to directors. And it baffles me because it seems to me that if I were developing legislation on any subject, let's say it's something relating to Parks and Rec, that it's much more productive when you're trying to pull together what you want to propose. If you could have a conversation with the director or the appropriate staff person to make sure you have correct facts, to make sure you understand what might work and what might not work
Right.
before you even start drafting legislation. But if you can't talk to people, I don't know how you get the ball rolling on stuff like that.
Well, I will say, at the beginning of the mayor's term, there was less of communication. But he did start freeing up the communication and did allow them to communicate. And they could ask for them to attend the meetings, and as long as they said why they were attending it, because what had happened before is that they just wanted these people to attend the meetings when they weren't really needed. Well, 2 hours out of a person's time when they're trying to run the city is a lot of time. But if you're trying to do legislation, that's a different thing, because that's an appropriate use of the staff's time is to help with the legislation. I would just say, I think you have to be cautious of what you put in a charter, because you can lock too many things in that then you have to go through a whole nother charter thing to get them changed, where legislation can be easily changed. So, some things might be better done via legislation and just put in place a framework at the charter level
Right.
that
But that hasn't happened.
sets it.
There hasn't been legislation addressing flow of information.
No, there's no agreement on it.
So my question is, if legislation is the answer, why hasn't there been legislation?
Because there's no agreement on it.
There's no agreement that there should be a flow of information?
There's no agreement on what that should say. And nobody has stepped forward to decide to do it. And nobody seems to be concerned because they were eventually getting the things they needed. So,
We're not hearing that from everybody, Melody.
well, I
I know
know,
you and I had a phone conversation about this, but we're not hearing that from everybody.
I know.
And I find it just blows my mind. That is so hard for a member of city council to have a 20-minute conversation with a director. I just don't understand how city council is expected to function under those circumstances.
Well, we did hear from Justine Boyd now and Craig Cobb, who both said in different ways that the city as a whole is still learning to work with this new form of government.
They are.
It's still new in a sense. You've had newly elected city councilors with no experience with government kind of thing. You have a mayor, a completely new position in the city, that things are still finding their level, that it's a little bit premature. Now, that doesn't go along with these screams of whatever that we've heard from some individuals, but some people with more legislative experience have been saying, we're still learning how to do this. There's no insoluble problems ahead of us. We still just have to kind of keep working through things
Very true.
as calmly as possible.
Very true. And it just is taking time as people get used to what they can or can't, what's appropriate or inappropriate. And, that can also vary in terms, if you're suddenly like, right now, our police are down 12 officers.
Wow.
And some of the other staff is down. So, when it becomes the time becomes more valuable, that also enters into how much time is appropriate, Because I'm pretty sure everyone wants public works out there doing their job and police out there doing their job and stuff. So, it's working through the kinks. It is a new form of government.
One thing related to that we talked about is mandating some sort of orientation and or training for newly elected officials so they have a better sense of elected office has a different etiquette. There's ethics requirements, there's open meeting laws, there's all sorts of things that you don't encounter in your daily life, but now as an elected official you do encounter. Craig said, well, we'll just learn on our feet kind of a thing, but some of us feel that a little leg up would be very helpful at the start to prevent some kind of, missteps, some misunderstandings, that sort of stuff.
It would, and I will say, we have OML training, which we provided council 2 different OML trainings. One was a conference for 3 days and one was a 1-day thing. And there's NOACA, which also has for first-time legislators to train them. That email, in fact, I just got a copy of that email, so I forwarded it to Jim Petrus, so he would know that training's coming up. But, there were taped orientations with the staff that we did, but having a new orientation is good. But not everyone takes advantage of it. So requiring them to utilize the resources that they've been given to get the training, and CSU has training as well. So there's many different ways they can get it, and the city pays for it. It's in the council budget.
Right.
So requiring them to get the training, I think is not bad. You need sunshine law, which the law department tells us, go get this, here's the link, go do it, so we know that one. But, having perhaps a list of things, well, we wouldn't want to be too rigid in the sense if new things come up and new trainings, you don't want to, but requiring them to actually get the training is probably a good idea.
Our facilitator said you require training, but don't specify the organizations because they may change. So
Right,
you don't
they
want
may
to put that in the
change.
charter. But thank you for that, because of my feeling that, especially if the city is paying for it, because I wouldn't want anybody to be further out of pocket after.
Oh, no,
for all-
they have we've budgeted $2,000 per council member for training. So there's sufficient.
Resources, okay.
So going back for a second to the budget, comments about the budget. I'm guessing that while we might want to recommend something in the charter about the process including meetings that include directors or other appropriate staff and that offer a chance for city council people to ask questions, but we wouldn't want to get into a lot of detail on that for
No,
the same
no.
reason that you don't want to get too granular.
It should just be a broad thing of, maybe something even as simple as the finance chair, or you could say the president of council, having the authority to specify the format or what is needed for the budget. We wouldn't want the council to be saying to the finance director, no, I want this number here and I want to do the chart of accounts differently. We don't want to allow for that type of interference, but we would want it to where they can specify, here's what we need to do our job.
Okay. So you've mentioned 3 things. Is there anything else you think is particularly important?
Oh, emergency legislation. That drives me nuts. It's not an emergency. All it is putting it into place immediately instead of waiting 30 days for it to go in place. So
Yeah, I don't know.
changing the
and maybe-
phraseology would be better. Just say
Maybe the law
going-
department can help us on this, but I don't know what the latitude is, Lee, for city council to decide that something is gonna go into effect immediately as opposed to waiting. Because one of the reasons for the waiting 30 days is because it's subject to referendum. So I'm assuming that there are some constraints on when cities can say no referendum on this? Is that what the emergency legislation label is all about?
Bill worked on that, the language for emergency provisions in the last year or two. So I don't know that's a question for him. We can ask him.
I mean, as a legislation matter or as a practice matter?
I'll look at it. I'll have to get you an answer later.
I mean, a lot of things are like, when we're buying salt or getting an RFP, that doesn't really need to go to a lot of detail because we know we want it, the salt. So some things I think, it just makes sense to do that. Other things maybe not.
Yeah, your expression legislation for immediate effect makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
If it's legal in Ohio to do that, I mean, if it has to be called an emergency, like Black History Month became an emergency at the last council meeting. So, but people are saying like, this is not an emergency, but we do need something where it's like, if you don't have the 30 days, you can still get things going. So,
Right.
So we will investigate what the legal requirements are for legislation that takes immediate effect. If it has to be called an emergency or if there's some other phrasing you could put around it, because a lot of people go, come on, these emergencies.
I know, it makes it confusing to people.
So it also makes it seem a little farcical to overuse the term emergency.
Yeah, it does.
Well, the interesting effect of that is that it, again, impedes the ability of the citizens to question legislations. It's an emergency, it can't be subject to referendum.
Well, and it doesn't have 3 readings.
Right.
Most of the time we do 2 readings, even with emergency. There's some that go on first reading, but a lot of them are in 2 readings. So it's not.
But using it for something like a resolution is interesting because, there has been a small bit of controversy, I would say, recently because the city council passed a resolution supporting Israel after the October 7th attack, and there are people who feel there should be a resolution supporting the people of Palestine.
Yes.
So it's just interesting to contemplate if there had been multiple readings, might that have come out differently?
Yeah.
That's just one example. And on the other hand, for some of the routine, I call them routine resolutions, like recognizing Black History Month or other things that we do, during the course of the year, well, you wouldn't think that a referendum is really needed for something like that.
Yeah.
It's more a statement of, the prevailing attitudes of the moment on a particular issue as opposed to something substantive in a legislative sense.
Yeah.
So it's.
Well, interestingly, in the very example that you used, I'm familiar with this because my son lives in the state of Vermont and they outlawed salt in Vermont and used sand because salt is so detrimental to the environment. And so, I mean, even in some maintenance practices, there would be potentially, especially when it comes to environmental protection versus public safety, it's like sand isn't quite as good as salt, so maybe you want a mixture of sand, maybe you want 50-50, 70-30, I mean, even things like that. And salt is very detrimental to the environment. And not to mention your clothing and your house and everything else, but so, I mean, even some things like you would think that would be routine, could possibly be controversial at some level, or at least there might be a different way to do things.
Yeah. That's interesting that nobody's brought that up.
Yeah.
Oh.
No public comment has
Well,
come up on that.
the only reason I even know that is because my son lives in Vermont and they don't use, I mean, I guess they're now using salt again, but sand is more like earth, and it's.
Easier on our cars too,
Less trust. Another thing I think that should be considered is appointments to commissions. I don't know, that's probably more legislative maybe, but
Well, we asked about that.
yeah, so in my view on appointments to commission, if you wanna make it easy, just make it a split of mayor gets some and the council gets some and use that for everything if you want. Or you could break it out by way of, it could be broken out by whose commission it is, like the Arts Commission is the mayor's commission. So should he have all the appointments that we approve and the council, I don't know, I think that the easiest way, it could get too complicated, the easiest way might just be to have a split and, just make it standard for everything.
What about the simplicity of the application? If you wanna give to the city, on some, you have an expertise to give, but you don't have like a day and a half to fill out the application.
Oh.
You say, the hell with it, I mean, it seems like pretty cumbersome to get on a commission. Is that too high of a
I didn't think that
threshold?
application was that bad.
I mean, you wanna make it easy for people to contribute to their city.
Well, yeah, but you also, if you're asking people to fill out an application, the purpose for that is to try to evaluate whether somebody's bringing a skill set to a committee or a commission or whatever it might be. I filled out the form in the context of, I think it was planning commission. So I think it is relevant to understand whether a person applying has any experience that's relative to the task.
Right.
There may be some others, and I think there was an example given at the latest city council meeting about, maybe it was the committee of the whole, about people applying for the transportation committee. Maybe you'd like to have a mix of people who use public transportation versus people who bike versus people who use cars.
Right.
So, there may be some different kinds of information you want for various purposes.
Well, the reason I mentioned it is because I have a neighbor who I haven't had a conversation with her recently, but she had said she was waiting a year and a half to get on a commission, which seemed a pretty long time.
Well, but everybody who applies doesn't get appointed. I mean, it's.
Well, I mean, they hadn't done anything they hadn't people.
I mean, there were vacancies that hadn't been filled.
Yeah.
When I served briefly on the Commission of Aging, that was the situation. There were people who were attending meetings for a year who had had an application in for a year and had heard nothing
Really?
back.
Yeah, I don't think that's that unusual.
It had fallen between because it was not going to the people who had the authority. The applications somehow were going the wrong direction. So we tried to get it fixed, but again, at least there should be some automated function from the city website saying, thank you for the application. If you don't hear from somebody, I mean, a robo letter of some sort
Yeah,
would be
something would
nice.
be nice, yes.
Well, I think partly that question got asked because we noticed that there were different commissions mentioned in the charter that were appointed in different ways. So maybe it was the difference between the Civil Service Commission and maybe the Planning Commission?
I think it goes when and when the legislation occurs, then you have someone drafts it, okay, so for instance, trying to think of an example. Okay, trying to think of this, I think there was a commission that Anita was drawing up, and there was another one that was being drawn up by Gail Press, but the person themselves can tend to put what they think in there. So for instance, Racial Justice Task Force ended up with a lot of different people on it. A lot of it's pretty big, originally pretty big. And but that was drafted by one person, then someone else drafts it another way. And it can get, it can get very disjointed in the sense that it's however the person who's drafting it thinks it should be. And then, of course, it gets discussed, and sometimes it's changed, but sometimes it's not.
I would think, though, that if
Standardizing
something
would
like
be
that
good.
happens, that the law department might say, well, typically we do this, typically we do
That
this.
does happen. It does
Maybe this is a good size, maybe this is too big, maybe this is too small. Again, it's kind of a feedback loop to help people who've perhaps never drafted legislation for that purpose, to set up a commission. They have some guidance on what the implications are.
Well, the law department always does opine upon things when you're drafting it and says, when they think that something should be done differently. But that doesn't mean that the council member has to follow that.
Right.
So, but standardization, I agree, standardization would be actually a good thing on commissions.
But I take your point, though, that in some cases, commissions are set up to assist the executive or to assist the legislative. So there's a reason why the appointment process might be different.
And for instance, I believe the Civil Service Commission, I think one of the possible amendments is that the Civil Service Commission would determine the salary increases for the city council. If that were the case, then you wouldn't want to have the city council appointing the people who are going to
No, you
control
certainly wouldn't.
the salaries and things. So that's
Well, I
why
think
it
it's,
would be
right now, they're appointed by the mayor.
Yes, exactly. Which makes sense because there's that separation.
Right,
Mayor appoints, council gets the benefit of the salaries.
yeah.
But if they're also gonna speak to the mayor's salary, then
I think that would have to be approved by council though. So
Yeah, would have to,
that would get interesting.
So we also, I'm just mindful of the time here, we also asked about some other issues. So do you have any comments about the ranked choice voting idea?
I'm certainly not opposed to ranked choice voting. I think it can speed things up a little bit there, so I'm not opposed to it. It's
How about the way council's elected?
the way what?
Council is elected. Whether it should be changed to be a hybrid form with some at large and some by wards, or whether it should all be by wards, or should it all stay the way it is, which is all at large?
Well, I heard Janine's comments, and I understand, yes, it could become more divisive, that's true, and you could be fighting over things, that's true. The thing I would say in favor of wards, though, is that if we want to make sure minorities are not excluded from running. And if you have to run at large, your cost is $25,000, okay? Because you gotta mail to all these households. If you have a ward, you only have to mail to that ward. That lowers your cost. And so that might open the field for people who might not have the money or the fundraising capability to try to run. So that's the advantage. So there are disadvantages because, right, they can then start to just try to help their ward. But there are some advantages as well. I think you just have to weigh them out, which is the most important for the city.
I think we already talked about the ethics and training idea. The other idea that came up for consideration was adding a comprehensive non-discrimination policy statement. Now, and we're aware that I think there is a resolution about it.
Yeah, there's
It's not.
There's actually, I believe there's an ordinance involving that, but
It's an ordinance.
But that doesn't mean that you can't put it in the charter. We certainly don't want discrimination.
Yeah, I mean, we were, I think that's one of the points we were waiting for some input from the law department on, as to whether putting it in the charter could create some problems, because it's, how is it enforceable? What does it do for?
Yeah, we ran into that issue too, for enforceability. If you look at the model city charter, it says that a statement like that is more of a
Aspiration.
right, yeah, or statement of the community. Assuming it passes, I guess there could be some equity enforcement of it.
But does that mean that it's appropriate for a charter or it's not appropriate for a charter? I mean, is it more appropriate for a resolution rather than a charter? Does it not really matter?
Yeah, I'm not sure it would matter as far as enforceability, unless you put some enforcement mechanism in it. I don't know what that would be, commission to review it.
I would see the language in the charter as the foundation for legislation, not to take the place of it, but the foundation. If it were strictly by ordinance, I don't want my human rights shifting depending on the makeup of a council from election to election. I want something more long-lasting as far as protections for people like me. And then the councils can enact ordinances as needs arise, or as the mayor has seen with his revision of some of the city employee practices to protect more people of the LGBTQIA plus community. So the language in the charter establishing a foundation of human rights, along with Eleanor Roosevelt, I happen to think is very important.
And that aligns with what the facilitator has told us. The role of the charter is to lay out the basic relation of city government to the residents of the city.
And then the final one on this list is adding provisions to protect the rights of residents without citizenship, such as sanctuary city status. Now, I understand your point on this, Melody, that the city did consider this.
On a legislative basis, they considered it. So I think legal would have to opine on whether having it in the charter would impede our funding ability with the federal government, depending on who's president, or if it is enforceable as well.
Mm-hmm.
Good questions.
I mean, obviously, we want to protect them as best we can. So, but without hampering the city's ability to obtain funding for federal events.
You could have the situation where extremely right-wing governors get the list of sanctuary cities and send very large numbers of
Well, that's
undocumented workers to those cities that have declared themselves to be sanctuary cities. In fact, it's surprising.
Not a hypothetical, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not, well, he sent them to big cities, but he could get a list
Yeah.
and really punish, really own the libs that way.
The county and the kind of Cleveland immigrant community is creating a task force right now to address that eventuality.
Yeah, I think it's probably gonna happen.
Or they might keep their heads down.
Them meaning whom?
People who are having this, considering the possibility that this could happen, because you may just call attention to yourself.
Well, if these states are banning Merriam-Webster dictionaries, there's nothing they will do whether your head is down or not.
Well, I realize that, but does anybody have any other questions for Melody? She's answered the other questions in our survey very nicely, so I don't wanna.
Answers.
I would say, I think it's important that while you want staffing to be receptive to council, you also don't want to hinder the mayor's ability to direct his staff. Because it's important that he's the boss, he should get to tell them stuff, although not tell them things. And to give some insight to that is that when it became a problem, it wasn't a problem at first, but there were some council members that had really started to interfere with the work and were taking up inordinate amounts of time for staff, and they were very understaffed when the mayor came in. So I got called in, and so did Craig, to a staff meeting, and the staff said, "You gotta stop them. They are driving us nuts and we're not getting our work done." So that's when the mayor clamped down. Now, he eased up over time, thankfully, over time he was able to ease up, but you just don't want to be in a position where he ends up, his staff is not listening to him because they don't have.
Would training specifically required training have helped that process, do you think? Have mitigated that situation? Or do you think it was a personality issue?
Well, I think some people are more needed more, or felt they needed more contact and wanted it on an ongoing basis. So, it's like if I go in and talk to you, I might give you bullet points. And if someone else goes in and talks to you, they might spend 2 hours talking to you. So some of it's style, and so you have to a mayor has to be able to say, 2 hours is not acceptable. And I think part of it too was he was new at the time, so he was trying to learn how to be a mayor as well as, the staff, the council trying to learn how to be a council. But I just would, you can require certain things, but some things I think you have to allow a person to manage their department.
I think when the memorandum of understanding was in effect, there was a data component of that, where somebody was keeping track of requests going in and requests coming out. My understanding is that that's not happening anymore.
No, it's not. They have direct access to talk to them.
But I think it's a mistake that the data is not being collected.
Well,
Because then we have no way of knowing whether there truly is a lack of information flow, or
Yeah.
whether it's whether it's an even-handed lack of information flow or not.
Well, I think then it would be that they would have to request the clerk to do it and have to direct everyone to copy the clerk. She can track it.
Yeah.
That's how we tracked it with the MOU.
Right. But it's just interesting to me that the tracking was stopped, because then you have no data. You have no way of knowing whether some people get a fast response and some people get a slow response. And I realize that fast and slow doesn't necessarily answer the question, because you have to know fast response to what, slow response or no response to what.
Well, we didn't track it because the mayor then said he wanted to know for people to come to him if they had not gotten a response from someone. So as long as they went to him, and there were times someone came to me and I told the mayor such and such did not get a response, and he followed up. So, it's also their responsibility to follow up.
It's sort of that collaboration you've been talking about a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Takes both sides collaborating,
right.
not just one.
Melody, this is off topic. I don't know if you happened to watch the last council meeting.
I did,
Well, thanks to Graham and Councillor
yes.
Maddox, the resolution about Gaza is back on the agenda for next.
Yes, I saw that. I listened, I thought that was good.
Graham made the effort to get out there and speak to it, and Councillor Maddox picked up the ball and said, I
He
think
did.
we should do
And
that
got it on the agenda
publicly,
Glad to see it.
yes.
publicly, which was a good way to do it.
Yes.
To get it there.
Appreciate your help with that.
No
Does
problem.
anybody have any other questions for Melody? I don't wanna keep you too late here.
No.
Okay, thank you
So,
very much.
much for
The
your time.
advantage of being off council, I can go to dinner while you guys sit here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Melody.
Thank you, Melody.
Thanks for being the support person back there too. Yeah. You'll be able to reinterpret all of this out as you're at dinner.
That's great, Graham. Did you initiate that?
And some other folks.
That's great.
David Heiss.
And thank you all for your work on this. I appreciate the time you've taken. I know it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you again for sharing. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, legal.
We get special mention.
No. Okay, so, okay, good discussions. So, do we have any specific comments about our discussions tonight with city council members before we shift on to other topics?
I thought that Councilmember Boyd's perspective was very interesting.
Or what?
Her perspective was very interesting, not really what I expected. And yeah, I don't
In
know.
what sense?
That she didn't seem to think that many changes were needed at all. And just I didn't anticipate that, and I guess something to think about.
If you,
Well, Craig's essentially said essentially the same.
and if you watch their demeanor at city council meetings, they are both, but Janine in particular is like a studious calm about the whole thing. She is just going to ride it out, and her statements are never inflammatory, never anything like that. They're just straightly forward. So it was interesting that she didn't have any suggestions for changes, but it seems in keeping with her record as a city councilor that would be where she's at.
Stoic legislator.
Yeah, she did give a non-qualified thumbs up to Sanctuary City, though.
That's true.
First and possibly only.
That is true.
I guess the only thing I want to say briefly is I was in the city of Cleveland's law department for about 2.5 to 3 years. And I don't know if nobody's ever said this or if this has not been discussed, but the way Cleveland Heights is running is not the norm at all. It should not take them 2 years to get in this. I understand it's difficult. They're all new. They're all bright, intelligent, articulate adults. It should not take 2 years to get the hang of this. It took me 2 years to get the hang of. It should not take them 2 years to get the hang of this. If it took me 2 years to get the hang of my job, I would have lost it. So the issue of, hey, they're growing into it, they're gonna get into it, they're still working out the kinks, I just don't buy it. It's not what I've seen in other city governments. It's not what I would expect from a city council that we elected or elected. So, that's my position for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I find it
Completely
frustrating.
agree with that. But some of the things we saw after 2 years plus in office, did you just walk in off the street? Don't you know that this is open meeting law? You can't have a phone conversation with the counselors about an issue. Shocking, it really is kind of shocking. I appreciated Melody's and Janine's thought, but it convinces me that some sort of mandated training is really important.
The sunshine law training is mandated.
Yes, but apparently it's not sinking in. So I think, in my experience, a few trainings that reinforce each other, training as a newly elected official, training on sunshine law, training on this and that, they tend to start making you take it more seriously than if you just took 1 2 hour online, take the box kind of a thing. So but anyhow, Greg, I appreciate the insight because I completely agree that we can't wait 2 years for people to figure out how to be on the city council.
Well, and I don't think we can keep waiting for people to work together.
The sunshine law training is available on the Attorney General's website. I think you might have to schedule for viewing, but you can see what city council members are trained on for open meetings and public records, and if you're a lawyer, you can get CLE credit for it, so.
That would be still my beating heart.
Can I ask you to clarify, is that the training where you can send a delegate?
I wasn't aware of the delegate,
That's the only training we really discussed, I believe. and
I think it
somebody-
is, I think
And they
it's,
said you could just send a delegate, which to me reduces the
I think
effectiveness.
all our council
Possibly reduces the effectiveness.
You're such a diplomat. We could send you straight to the United Nations.
Well,
So is it free and you get CLE credits?
Yep.
I may actually have to go online and do that.
But it's also required, so if they don't do it, what happens?
we get audited by the state auditor every year for public records and open meetings, so I'm sure it would be in their report.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the citizens will get punished for their actions.
Yeah.
Because we'll have to pay for it if we're cited.
Are there
I don't know-
fines?
I don't know if they're fine.
Probably not.
It's just generally reported.
But we'll pay for it in other ways as far as dysfunction.
Yeah, we would pay more.
I kind of liked Representative Boyd's or Councilwoman Boyd's framing of it as an orientation, rather than like mandated training. Like say like a 3-day orientation that like, because if you have a training, I had to do a cybersecurity training recently for my job, and I did not pay attention to a single piece of it, right? Because like I feel like I know how to be secure cyberly, right? And
You
like
didn't include a quiz that you had to pass?
yeah, but you don't even have to pay attention to pass those quizzes, right? Like
Questions are pretty, yeah.
right? And so it's just like I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe that's what happened in this case with the open meeting laws, right, or the sunshine law training, right? But if you had a specific orientation where it's like a 3-day thing where it's like you're going to go through these things point by point and that's all you're doing, I feel like that might be more effective.
I would agree. I mean, I think, Melanie ticked off 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of training that they could do. That reduces the chance that they're gonna do any of them. So if you had a qualitative training that is one training that everybody has to take, maybe even together, I think that would be much preferable.
Well, I don't think we can get in the weeds on that, not in the charter.
Well, we could say an orientation put together by the law department. I mean, I think the problem is, you get, you could do OML training, I don't even know what that is, NOACA is a
Ohio Municipal League.
Okay, and NOACA is a planning agency, I mean,
They need training. They need training in the kinds of things that NOACA does. I mean, ULI also has a program that helps people understand economic development. They have an
I'm
excellent.
not saying the trainings aren't good, I'm just saying, there's, with all these options, people are gonna say, I think it definitely reduces the chance that they're gonna avail themselves of any of them.
I think though that for purposes of the charter, I don't think we would get into specifying a particular training program they have to take. We might want to say something like training required by the state of Ohio, and if not already included in that, that it would include training on the legislative process, roles and responsibilities of the mayor versus city council. I mean, we could just tick off a couple of,
You could say something like training that is, in addition to being required by the state of Ohio, is specific to Cleveland Heights, which would then suggest it should be a Cleveland Heights training.
Well, I don't know that there's really something that should be specific to Cleveland Heights. Because that suggests that Cleveland Heights is weird. And I don't think what they should be doing is like, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. We shouldn't have all these convoluted rules for how people arrange to talk to a director about legislation. I just think it's a false premise that you have to have complicated procedures for that.
Well, and one of my takeaways from Janine Boyd was an impression that she brought the idea of some proposals or et cetera. It's like I have experienced council or legislative people where they have great ideas and all they want to do is talk about them. And that becomes a huge derail, many, many hours, blah, blah. So it's like, we'll do something solid and then they don't. So I kind of got this impression that it was an interesting insight on top of, I can see how administration could be abused, I see how legislation could be, like in terms of those balance pieces. And striking it, really, there'll be maybe an overarching statement or something in the charter, but a lot of this comes down to people just, they have to get along, or the voters, we have to start paying better attention.
Well, I agree totally
Yeah.
with that, and I think that I think it's true, not surprisingly, but true, that of course, if you've already served on a city council or in the state legislature, you understand way better how you go about starting to draft legislation. But everybody has to do that for the first time, and I don't know that it's intuitive. So I'm assuming that there's some training out there that would say how to write a bill. You know, not that they're gonna write the final version, but there would be some instruction, like, wasn't there Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law?
I'm just,
You know, there's some basic stuff out there, but it would help people understand these are the steps that you might wanna take. But I think at some point, when you're developing legislation, I would think that it's reasonable that you need to talk to a director in some way, shape, or form to be sure that what you're proposing works. You know, is it functionally gonna work? Does it repeat something we already have? You know, is it totally off the wall and not appropriate for city government? But you gotta have that kind of information flow. And I'm not sure that the avenues are there to have that information flow for everybody on council. Some people may have it, but I don't think everybody does.
Well, we're in the worst of all possible situations if it's true, and I do believe it's true, that some people get unlimited access to everything and other people get zero. I mean, basically what Gail told us and what she's told me one-on-one is that she gets nothing from anybody. She's never gotten a response, even now, never talked to the mayor, never, zero, nothing. And that's vastly different from what Janine reports. And that is worse than nobody getting anything, because they all should be treated the same.
Right.
That is critically important,
But at the
and
same-
they're not.
But at the same time, why can't they help each other? If you have avenues, why can't you make a phone call for me or do an email for me? Why can't you help me get that access? Why can't you help me
But have
learn
you
the
ever
ropes?
watched legislative bodies? There are sides, there are factions. I mean,
I know.
it's human nature. We can't expect
And we
perfection
can't,
here.
and we can't charter, we can't get rid of it.
But
But
things
at the
didn't,
same time,
things didn't work that way at the city of Cleveland though. That's exactly the point, is that there was the free flow of information between the directors, the commissioners, the managers, the law department, and city council. We all work together because we're all pulling in the same direction. And that's why, from the charter perspective, I struggle with, it's a personality issue. We're not gonna legislate or charterize the personalities. We have to figure out a way to give city council some more potential leeway, but ultimately,
Right.
it's gonna be up to them to figure it out, or we will
Right.
take them out.
Right, but I think it can be something as simple as saying that city council or a committee chair
Right.
can request a director to attend a meeting,
I like that.
and they have to attend a meeting. Now, in some cases, that may not really be what you need. It may be more helpful to have a 20-minute conversation offline, but if there's something in the charter, at least it gives you a way to say, well, we could do this, but how about if we do this instead? Wouldn't that be more convenient if we talk at 10 o'clock instead of you having to come to my 7 p.m. city council meeting?
Interesting.
Working with human nature in a way that tries to find mutuality of interest and convenient ways of solving problems for everybody.
See, I think some of this does go back to the
Can I
initial
say,
orientation.
can I jump in?
Sure.
I'm sorry, it's hard for me to hear clearly what everyone's saying, but I think what I was hearing Greg say is something that I agree with, that like we can't draft charter changes that are personal to like just who's currently there, and it's like if there's personality things or things like that going on, like that's really not our role, I don't think. And also say we put some sort of language about a director has to attend a meeting or something. I mean, what's the consequence if they don't? like they can just choose not to. I don't know, like is the charter some binding document that they have to follow the rules? Like I'm just trying to understand, like think through all of the things. Like if we put that language in there, then what?
It could be, I mean, like, something that's in the charter like that could be then brought up as at a performance review, right? Or even be used as a reason for dismissal, theoretically.
Well, council doesn't have the authority to dismiss.
No, is that malfeasance of office though, if you violate the charter?
Could be.
There's another word that sounds just like it and I can't remember what it is.
Misfeasance.
Thank you. Because one's law, what's the other one?
Well, I mean, well, what I was starting to say before was, I do think that orientations are critically important. And I really think that they all ought to have the same one. And I don't know how, I just think that's a really important point. And I think we definitely need to talk to Josie Moore. She absolutely, clearly quit city council because she couldn't get information.
Hearsay, Your Honor, I mean. if
She said that.
I know, but that is something she said to you. I think
Okay.
we have to stop quoting people who talk to people who, I heard this and I heard that.
Okay.
She
All
said
right.
it on a public podcast, so I mean, it's out there. It's,
Okay, all right.
So,
but all the more reason to have her
But
here.
it's important to get
Yeah.
the perspective of someone who's sort of the opposite of Janine. She was brand new. She had never been on a city council before. She was, had lots and lots of ideas, lots and lots of plans, lots and lots of, so I mean, I think it's important to get the perspective of somebody who is at the opposite, who's a complete newbie and who I think again, according to her own public statements, she was long on ideas and short on experience. And that's the type of person that tends to run for city council, especially if you're encouraging younger people to run, who tend to be more idealistic, more, substantive and not worrying about details. And so I think it's important that, I still go back, I think orientations are very, very important. And I don't think a list of saying, these are all the things you can do one of them is sufficient for a city like ours, which I will stand on my statement, it is a weird city because you have over-engagement, over-involvement, we're different from other cities. There are other cities in the country like us, but, we have these peculiarities that make for the situation that we find ourselves in today is partially because of our peculiarities. And so I think it's important that we address some of those peculiarities. And one way we could do that is by really focusing on, somehow putting into the charter something about orientation, not training. I think orientation is a much better word. Janine said they have 3 days at the State House.
We could just put 3 days orientation, with a curriculum designed by the law department based on standards for municipalities across the state of Ohio.
Could do that.
Jonathan?
Oh, it's 7:31. How long is the consideration of presenters and issuance? Like, just being mindful.
I think I would like to spend some time on that because I think we need to seriously consider our work plan and we can't really do that without knowing who we want to have come in and talk to us. Let me find I have a couple notes on this.
I think anybody who's ever held an elected office for the first time, it can be a very bruising experience. It really can be. You find out that it's not this, it goes to Washington sort of
Right.
thing. Very, very painful. Really. I think anybody who's done that, that experience is legitimate.
Okay, can we look at the so we had previously had at one of our meetings a chart of potential presenters that we would ask to come in. But I have a couple of specific questions for you. And one of them has to do with Josie. But the first one is, do we want to hear from additional former city council members? Now, let me divert for just 1 second. We haven't yet heard from the mayor or from Counselor Maddox. I followed up today with Counselor Maddox. I left him a voicemail message because I haven't heard back from him concerning the survey. He did sign up for an interview slot, but he hasn't returned a survey. So I was just making sure that he had the link and that he had not sent it back to me, and somehow I missed it. I haven't seen it in my emails. And then the mayor told me that he was gonna get back to me in a week or two, which probably puts us into, like, I can remind him now and say, can you let us know when you wanna come talk to us? But we had talked early on about perhaps talking with some former city council members in addition to Melody, and Josie was on that list.
Is there anyone else on that list?
I don't think we specifically identified other former city council members, but we certainly could ask a couple other former city council members. Just, I'm raising the subject so you all can chime in on what you think we should do.
Well, I'm not pushing this, but I could, the only one I can think of that would be maybe a bit of a contrast to Josie would be Unger, who's still around. I mean, Melissa's moved away, Carol Rowe has moved away, Mary Dunbar has dementia.
I think she's moved away too.
She's moved away as well. So I mean, those three aren't so accessible, but Unger is a very, he'd be sort of the opposite example from Josie. He's a seasoned attorney, one of the best, whatever, trial attorneys in the state or whatever his credits are. I mean, he's got a list of credits behind his name, and so I'm not pushing it, but I'm just throwing it out there. I think the only other one besides Josie would be Unger. I can't remember his first name.
Mike.
Mike Unger. So that's all I would throw that out for discussion purposes. I don't have an opinion.
What do you all think?
I've heard his name often enough in terms of his taking a role. I don't know, I really don't know anything about him.
I guess my only concern with him is he was one of the chief proponents of the city manager system, not the mayoral, so I don't know how much he would add to the discussion. He'd probably come in here and say, this is what I told you was gonna happen, you should have stuck with city manager. Knowing Mike.
Well, we don't know. I mean, some of us think we know what Josie's gonna say, and we're still gonna ask her to come in and talk to us, so.
I mean, if he's the only one that is even like on the table, I feel like.
Well, the other person who's around, who was on council before, is Cheryl Stevens.
Oh, yeah?
That's true.
Well, there are some really throwbacks, like back when we elected Republicans. Who's the?
Ellen Rappaport?
Rappaport, and there's another one, is there
Love the committees and talk.
or, there's 2 or 3 of those guys that are a long time ago. Isn't there some big real estate guy that used to be on city council? I'm blanking on his name.
Montlock, but he passed away.
Montlock.
He passed away.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, every invitation is gonna be more of our time.
Right.
Yeah,
Right,
I think it might be more valuable to talk to people in other cities, like Shaker Heights and South Euclid and Lakewood, and say, what do you guys do about flow of information? Is this a problem for you? I just would be interested to hear what their perspectives are on that.
I'd be interested to hear how they overcome personality conflicts. How they act like grown-ups.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I'm feeling like I might just be alone in this, and that's fine, but my opinion about this process is we're just sort of like trying to listen to the interpersonal dynamics of city council rather than reviewing the charter, and I think maybe the survey is plenty as far as giving us a little bit of feedback on what they think, but I feel like I'm just not sure that this is turning out to be like the best use of our time. That's just my opinion.
Well, and if I remember the email right, the mayor said he would round up the different directors or
He was going to talk to a few of his directors who, sort of people who might be implicated by what's in the survey. So I'm presuming he might have wanted to talk to the finance director about the budget stuff, except we don't have a finance director anymore, but maybe there's staff people he would wanna talk to.
Gotcha. So really, kind of piggyback off of what Stephanie said, as well as you guys have brought off, why don't we focus, so we've got a slot for Maddox, the mayor, I don't know, at some point in time. Is Josie slated, did she get a survey?
I didn't give her one,
Okay,
but you
and
know, we could
then
ask her what
switch
she thinks.
to like University Heights, Shaker Heights, or the other places where it's working, or they might have other ideas.
Well, also Councilor Russell and Councilor Petrus, they're scheduled, but we are meeting with them as well.
Right.
The mayor hasn't been scheduled yet, but I think Councilor Maddox is scheduled.
He is.
Yes.
Our next meeting on the 22nd is with
Davida.
Councilor Maddox and Councilor Russell. And then Jim Petrus is talking to us on the 24th.
Excuse me,
Josie and the mayor would be the only ones, Josie hasn't been invited, but those would be the only ones not yet scheduled.
Right, and the other, we also talked about talking with people from the committee for an elected mayor. So Jean Gordon and Tony suggested the other persons from that committee who would have insight into why they included what they included is Len Friedson. Is that Friedson?
Yeah.
And then I think you wanted to have somebody talk to us about ranked choice voting?
Kyle Herman.
And we have Jay Westbrook for electing Cleveland City Council by districts.
Well, he was a potential person to talk about
Potential.
that.
I would, I'm a personal friend of Jay's, and one of his personality traits is loquaciousness.
Yes, he is.
Extreme loquaciousness. So I just wanna put that
Well,
out
let's just talk for a second
public referral.
about focusing in on who we want to invite in. Because, for instance, if we want to have some input from some of the mayors from other cities, we could try to arrange a time when they could come in together. So it'd be kind of a panel presentation
That's nice.
instead of 3 separate slots. And that would be, perhaps would save some time and could still get us valuable information. It probably would be a little tricky to arrange that schedule-wise, but it's possible. What do you think about that?
Could the mayors attend via Zoom?
They could,
I
yeah.
think that if we offer them that option, that would make it much easier for them.
good point.
I mean, can't they?
Yeah,
We're the ones who have to be physically.
you have to be here in person, at least a quorum of you.
I just have a question for Greg. Is there somebody, while you were at the city of Cleveland, is there someone who you would identify as a person who really understood why it worked and would be valuable to talk to? And maybe there isn't such a person, but
I think in the city of Cleveland, it was just a tradition. That's how it always worked, unfortunately.
okay.
That's the
Oh,
way.
sorry. That's all
That's the way it had always broken down.
right. Okay.
What do you mean, it worked? What is
The free flow of information, directors and commissioners, managers,
Okay.
communicating with the city council as needed. It's a bigger organization, so city council has their own legal staff, and so there's not.
Oh, yeah, I understand.
But
Getting back to what Stephanie said, I mean, it is good. It will be good. It could be good to hear from these people. We still have to be looking at the charter. We're still months into this and we're still prepping kind of thing. And it really concerns me. I'm hoping that in April, we're gonna have to devote full time to charter language. I hope we will be ready to do that kind of thing, because otherwise we won't have a product by the end of May. And it would break my heart if we came out of a year of meetings without anything to send to the council.
Well, the good news is that because we went through the entire 2019 proposed changes, we have a lot of text.
Yes.
There are some things that we'll have to draft to.
We're gonna
The
have
good
to
news
do-
is there's a lot that we did
But-
say, yes, we'll keep that, we won't keep that, we'll keep that, we won't
Yes,
keep
but
that, so.
we lost, well, Jonathan says they're in the minutes kind of thing. We didn't track on a document some of our proposed changes to the 2019.
I
So
thought
we'll
we
have to
found
put
that,
it
you
in.
found it, didn't you?
No.
No, it was
Sending-
before him.
Yeah.
we didn't have digital access or
He
anything.
sent me what he had and we've lost some of
So
the changes we proposed.
they just ended up in the minutes. They never got put into the Word doc, that's all. And someone just needs to do that.
And so we'll have to retrieve that. And then there's also the current charter is the legal document for the city. We can't write over that. We have to make sure that we are not putting anything that conflicts with that, which in some sections will involve a line by line, you know. In others, it can be just large blocks. But again, that's going to be finicky work because we have to maintain the legal document that we've been assigned to review.
And the impression I'm getting is that it seems like we should meet with, is it Petrus, Russell, Maddox, Mayor, and then the panel of mayors, and ranked choice voting, and then just kind of stop at that for the moment, and then maybe weave in there, well, there'll be the public meeting in February. So I guess it's like, could you get all the interviews done before the public meeting would be the question.
There are 3 specific organizations that we talked about potentially reaching out to previously, including the Forest Hill Homeowner Association, Future Heights, and Safer Heights.
Yeah, so those were carryovers from last time. And I don't know to what extent those really related more to getting their input on the change in the form of government. So I'm not sure that we necessarily have to have all of them come in and see us. But again, it's what's,
I
we
think
can
we
talk
should
about
have
it.
all 3 of them.
Yeah. We could extend a special invitation to our public meeting and to ask Future Heights, Safer Heights, and then to send representatives to that.
Yeah, we should ask at our
Good
public
idea.
meeting for input, for sure. And organizational input. Because if they want to give input, we want to hear it.
Realistically, we don't have the time to set up even more extra meetings to meet with representatives.
Yeah, I would add to your list, I would add Josie.
See, and I think we should drop her.
You should what?
I think we should not interview Josie.
Why is that, please?
Because she left council. From what I've heard here, she was very clear, she idealistic, ran into a bunch of blocks, et cetera. I don't see that to how any different from the information we've gotten from other council members where it's not working the way it is, we need access. So I feel like we've got the overarchings and I just don't see what value would get from her. It might be very micro. So that's my take on it.
To go along with what you and what Stephanie said, we aren't a grievance department after all. I mean, we're trying to collect information, but at a certain point when we just are getting redundant information, it may be therapeutic for individuals, but as far as our function as a commission, it's not helpful.
And it by no means means her as a person or her on council. Or, yeah, it was just like I feel like I've gotten a sample so far of everything's fine, everything's broken, maybe it's cool, you know, and so based off of that, that's all the current players, switching that to the panel, you know, getting through the rest of the current people, and then really kind of getting more into the meat of, okay, so it is working in Beechwood or whatever. Why? And if it's as simple as personalities, then, well, not much we can do, but like kind of start lighting a fire.
Yeah,
And I think Stephanie brought that up well.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. I will just offer that she's a kind of archetype. Young, very bright, loaded with ideas. You know, the kind of person that we would all like to see run for office.
You're
And
describing Graham.
yeah, right. I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, she's an archetype, and she's a unique archetype. There's nobody else on council that's, you know, that's like her. So that's the only thing I would say, without disagreeing with your point. I think, you know, and I think she'd love to. I mean, we'd have no trouble talking. She'd love to talk. She's been very active ever since she left council in various endeavors.
But then she was one of Gail's reelection committee people. So I think Gail can speak to that, even if she isn't young. That's the only part I would take out of that. She's bright, she's articulate, she's got lots of ideas, she's just not Graham's age.
Maybe we should just interview Graham.
Yeah, right.
I'm here all night.
Every night.
So do we need to take a vote to be very clear with each other? Do we, what Well, how do we move forward?
I think Jonathan's list makes sense, get through that. If we have extra time and energy coming.
So can we review your list again?
Well, it was everyone that, so it was Petrus, Russell, Maddox, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I would not kill myself trying to get the mayor in. It's,
Oh, he said he wanted to talk to us.
oh, absolutely, but it's like one of those time as kind of like a, we're not gonna chase you down kind of a thing, but that's just,
Well-
yeah.
But I think though, we need to hear from the administrative side.
That would be great.
Yes, yeah, that's actually one thing I maybe would like to add to the list, right? Department heads.
Yeah, how about the?
Well, I thought the mayor would bring that.
How about Danny Williams?
Because if we're talking about right of inquiry, I feel like right now we're getting the questioning side, but we're not getting any of the answering side. You know, and so like I do feel like, I mean, we
See, and I thought the mayor was gonna bring that. He said he wanted to touch base with department heads.
okay, so he'd
Well,
bring
that
their
doesn't
feedback.
mean, that
Yeah,
doesn't.
no, I don't think there's any substitute for the mayor.
No, that's entirely, like, that was my assumption.
Well, I think when Linda recontacts him saying we need to get something scheduled, she could say, and we'd really appreciate it if you could bring any department heads that you think might have something to say to this issue.
He won't bring any department heads,
Okay, well,
because he doesn't like to bother them in the evening.
yeah, I get that, yeah.
Well, and to me, like, an invitation's an invitation. If you wanna show up, great, and if you don't, you'd like, but it might be nice to,
Try another panel. Get them all in here at once.
I just wanna say, I can't imagine not talking to the mayor, okay, so if somebody suggested that, I just wanna say that.
Yeah, I
Can't even
totally.
imagine that.
I'm not saying not to.
Okay, it's pretty important, I think it's pretty important to do it.
And then, so all I had was the Petrus, Russell, Maddox, mayor, and then a panel of mayors or other cities. That was my list. And then now we're talking about department heads. Am I correct on that? Or we need an administrative perspective, right?
So
No,
you
we have the
saying,
mayor.
are you saying not the ranked choice voting person?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, in the NAPR, I just didn't write it.
And you're saying not the elected mayor people?
No, I'm saying yes to the panel. So really, I'm just saying no to Josie. Now it's on record. Well, and then we agreed the nonprofits or some of the other organizations can be part of the public meeting. So it was really,
Yeah, let's just give all these other organizations, these civic, like, an opportunity to
Business owners,
to contact us, but we're not gonna interview them.
that's good.
I do, if we could take a minute, I do want to acknowledge Guy's work on this sort of a thing. And I'm really glad we think it's a
Can I just
fair-
ask you to back up a second, because we really have to finish this if we're gonna get a work plan done. And I appreciate his work as well, but I think this was our agenda item for tonight. So, let me just make a note here before I forget this.
So just to make things simpler, I withdraw my comments about Josie, we don't have to.
and what's your friend's name, the ranked choice person?
Kyle Herman.
Kyle Herman, okay.
Okay, so what we're saying is to recap, we have meetings scheduled with the three other city council people we haven't heard from yet, and we believe we're gonna have a meeting with the mayor, but that has not yet been scheduled. I will try to contact the mayors from Shaker Heights, South Euclid, and Lakewood to see if they would participate in a panel discussion. And tell them they could come in person, or we would be happy to have them on Zoom, whatever they prefer. Harriet, you could reach out to Kyle Herman, and I'll reach out to Jean Gordon and Len Friedson. So should we have a motion to approve all that?
So move.
Second, you're here.
Second,
Second.
Okay, can I, in the
Roll-
discussion part?
discussion?
Melinda unmuted, no.
On the elected mayor folks, there are two of them, should we do a panel with the two of them?
At the same time, to have them both come in at the same time.
And you said Shaker, Lakewood, and
South Euclid.
thank you.
Or University Heights, not Lakewood? Yes, Lakewood?
I was suggesting Lakewood because they adopted an ordinance to address right of inquiry.
Okay. Do we want University Heights?
I think these three are more relevant to that issue.
Okay.
There's been a certain amount of drama in University Heights as well, so we don't need advice on how to inject drama.
Okay. Frankly, I have no idea.
We're on top of that.
Drama between the
Yeah, they may even have more drama than we.
All right, any more discussion?
Roland, I think, has something.
Roland?
No, I don't have anything. I'm a vote aye, yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay.
Except you can't.
Okay, so all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so all okay on that. Thank you all for your comments on that. All right, so I don't know whether anybody's had a chance to look at
Yeah, can I-
this draft.
Can I speak? So here's the idea. The idea of having a phone line initially was one of to get questions. Now I want to use it simply as a way to give information. And as you see, if you read this, I really, my style of working is not to try to do something by myself, to offer people the opportunity to give me comments, to make it better, yada, yada, yada. I don't have any expectation. There's no obligation on anybody's part that they give their time to this. Anything you give me, I'm going to give strong consideration to. The idea that I've done in the last paragraph is I've told them straight out, I prefer that you email crc@clevelandheights.gov with any ideas or questions, yada, yada, yada. But if you want, you can leave a message and I will do my best to give it attention. So I'm not really trying to gather questions and all that kind of thing. I'm really trying to use this as a forum to do a broadcast of, you saw this, now here's a little more information on it. Please come and join us.
Do you have another copy? Because I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, you're right. I came in late. I didn't get you. Apologies.
So, you're drafting something, or did you already draft something?
I sent something, it had to be submitted by January 15th, so I just sent a note, column to the Observer, just saying, hey, we're here, Charter Review Commission, we're doing a lot of work, tune in YouTube, and we're gonna have a on February 12th. We'd love to see you there.
Okay, so why don't you send that around to everybody?
Sure.
So we can read it before we see it in print. And then, I appreciate you writing this up, Guy. I didn't really have a chance to read it.
No, of course,
so-
I know it's very late notice, so I do ask, it's in an email as well. All right, so those who are not here will see it in their email. If you have comments, just get back to me and I'll incorporate those before I do the recording.
I'm not sure we can do that outside of a meeting.
Yeah, you'll meet next Monday.
Yeah, sorry,
We can provide input at the next meeting.
Yeah, we can do comments by Monday.
Yeah, I do have a couple suggestions, Keith, so.
Great, no, that's good, that's what I'm asking for.
So we'll just add this to the agenda then on Monday.
And
Yes, and then, related to this, have you heard anything back from Mike Thomas, Lee?
About posting,
Yeah,
other than, I don't know when exactly he is posting, but he agreed to do that, so.
but we don't know when he's gonna do it.
Well, no.
No, I'm sorry, his email did say he didn't want to get it into the latest posting because there were too many other meetings, and then he said, but I'm gonna post it, yada, yada, 3 different.
I asked him to move it up.
I know you did, I didn't see it.
I don't think he responded to that.
But at least he said he was gonna put it in the next the three between,
Yeah.
not this next one, between us and between the 12th of February.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, once we get this in final form, whether we wanna have him include this as well. So everybody has the benefit of your work in putting this together.
Oh, once we have that, sure, I'm sorry,
It would be edited.
I'll check with him.
yeah, after we finish polishing it.
Well, and also it wouldn't be a personal message from Guy to the public.
Well, and
Could be.
Yeah. Let me have my
Well, I mean, just,
Yeah.
I don't have I just think there's a certain aspect of having a real person to think you're talking to is,
No, I think for the voicemail, that makes a lot of
that's
sense.
all.
Yeah, I'll call. Yeah.
All right. And that's it.
Whoever changed the 2 to February, I really appreciate that, because otherwise it looked like a math problem to me. 2 times 12 is 24, so I'm glad we changed that to Feb.
I think they're equally good.
Yeah, that is right.
Yeah, we're having lots of fun with it. Divide, subtract, multiply.
Oh, we got 40, yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
Okay.
did we decide if when we voted just now, did we include departmental heads?
No.
we did not.
no,
I don't think they would feel comfortable speaking without clearing their statements with the mayor previously, so
Yeah.
it's futile.
We can ask the mayor about that.
So true.
sure. Do we have any lessons learned that we wanna state for this?
Can't legislate personalities, I guess, is the lesson.
I have a
learned.
lesson learned. I think that I may be alone in this, but I think that not responding to the survey made a big difference in the two interviews we had tonight. And I'm hopeful that Anthony Maddox will respond to the survey. It doesn't, you know, I mean, it makes a big difference.
And the mayor.
You saw and you saw the thoughtfulness and the thought that Melody had put into hers. And we still added a whole bunch of stuff to hers. So I think that, you know, that's.
Yeah, well, that's why I had sent the survey out and asked people to please send it, not only to send it in advance, but a couple days in advance, so we would all have a chance to read it and come to the meeting prepared to use our time effectively and to respect the time of the city council people. So, you know, in a perfect world, that happens. We don't always get what we want, so we do the best we can with what we've got. Anything else for the good of the order here tonight, folks?
Make a motion to adjourn?
I'll
Oh, did
second.
Stephanie leave?
It's 8:00.
Drew
Who seconded that?
I did.
Thanks, Drew. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.